The quiet end of an order, Europe, power, and the price of disunity, when Mario Draghi, former Prime Minister of Italy, declared in a speech in Belgium that the global order has ended, he was not engaging in rhetorical excess. There were no raised voices, no populist flourishes, no attempt to provoke outrage. The statement was delivered calmly, in institutional language, by one of Europe's most technocratic figures. Precisely for that reason, it deserved far more attention than it received, when a former president of the European Central Bank, a man whose career has been built on caution, data, and credibility, uses the language of rupture. It is not an emotional judgment. It is an accounting exercise. And the numbers no longer add up. The post-war illusion, Europe enjoyed notable stability for almost 80 years. After 1945, the world economy was organized around three assumptions: that trade would liberalize, that institutions would arbitrate disputes, and that geopolitical competition would be subordinated to economic integration. This system, underwritten by American power and European reconstruction, produced unprecedented prosperity. Tariffs fell. Supply chains stretched across continents. Political conflicts were managed through rules rather than retaliation. For Europeans, this order became invisible. It felt permanent. Like gravity, it was simply there, but gravity, too, depends on mass, and the mass is shifting. Power, measured in materials, the modern economy runs not on ideology but on inputs. Chips, minerals, energy, logistics routes, and standards committees now matter more than speeches. Consider rare earths. China controls 90% of global processing capacity. These minerals are indispensable for batteries, wind turbines, smartphones, and military systems. Europe's green transition, its flagship project for economic renewal, rests on supply chains over which it has almost no control. If Beijing restricts exports, Europe's climate ambitions become a policy document rather than an industrial reality. This is not a hypothetical risk. It is a structural vulnerability. The same logic applies to semiconductors, pharmaceutical precursors, and advanced machinery. The global economy has evolved into a network of choke points. Those who control them exercise power without firing a shot. Europe controls very few. Trade wars without weapons. The post-war order assumed that economic interdependence would restrain political conflict. Instead, it has become a weapon. The United States has imposed tariffs on European steel and aluminum. It has threatened broader levies. China routinely uses market access as leverage. Energy exporters manipulate supply. These are not aberrations. They are the new normal. Trade policy has become geopolitics by other means. Europe, designed as a regulatory power rather than a strategic one, struggles to respond. Its institutions excel at drafting standards. They are far less effective at wielding pressure. Rules matter only when those who break them fear consequences. Increasingly, they do not. Fragmentation as strategy. Draghi's most uncomfortable observation concerned not China, but America. He argued that Washington now openly regards Europe's political fragmentation as advantageous. A divided continent negotiates poorly. A unified one negotiates hard. This is not hostility. It is realism. Great powers prefer weak partners. 27 governments, each with vetoes, electoral calendars, and domestic taboos, cannot project coherent power. Consensus is slow. Strategy is diluted. Red lines dissolve into footnotes. Europe's institutional design, once praised for preventing conflict, now prevents coordination. Peace has been purchased at the price of impotence, a paper superpower. On paper, the European Union remains formidable. It is the world's largest trading bloc. In 2023, it managed €3.6 trillion in trade and maintained commercial relationships with over 70 countries. Its market size rivals that of the United States and China. In spreadsheets, Europe looks like a superpower. In crises, it behaves like a committee. Trade is the exception. Because Brussels holds exclusive authority, Europe speaks with one voice. And in trade negotiations, that voice carries weight. Elsewhere, energy, defense, diplomacy, it fractures. Foreign ministers contradict each other. Defense spending remains nationally fragmented. Energy policy oscillates between ideology and panic. The result is predictable: Europe is consulted, rarely followed, and often ignored. The tyranny of unanimity. Europe's core problem is not a lack of intelligence, expertise, or capital. It is its decision-making structure. Major policies still require near-unanimous agreement. 27 medium-sized states must align before acting. Any one of them can delay, dilute, or derail. This produces three outcomes. First, lowest common denominator policy. Bold proposals are trimmed into harmless compromises. Second, chronic delay. Decisions arrive after markets and rivals have moved on. Third, strategic paralysis. Long-term planning becomes impossible in a system built for short-term bargaining. The continent governs itself as if it were still managing coal and steel quotas. The world has moved on. The three dependencies. From this institutional weakness flow three deep dependencies. Economic dependence on China. European manufacturing relies heavily on Chinese inputs and markets. Attempts at de-risking remain cautious, slow, and politically contested. Diversification costs money. Dependency is cheap, until it is not. Energy dependence on exporters. Russia was once the most visible supplier. Others have taken its place. Europe still lacks a fully integrated, resilient energy system. Each crisis produces emergency measures, not structural reform. Military dependence on America. Despite decades of rhetoric about strategic autonomy, Europe remains militarily reliant on Washington. Intelligence, logistics, missile defense, nuclear deterrence, all remain American-led. Europe is defended, but not autonomous. Protected, but not sovereign. Leadership without horizon. Draghi is careful not to romanticize federalism. He does not claim that a United States of Europe would solve every problem. He argues something narrower: the current model is unsustainable. Yet political leaders continue to behave as if time were infinite. Migration debates dominate campaigns. Cultural skirmishes crowd out industrial policy. Short-term popularity trumps long-term positioning. This is rational behavior in fragmented systems. Politicians are rewarded for winning elections, not for building institutions that outlast them. Europe's decline, therefore, is not driven by malice, it is driven by incentives. Structural drift. The data reinforce the diagnosis. Europe's share of global GDP has been falling for 25 years. Research and development spending lags far behind American and Chinese levels. Venture capital remains scarce. Technological champions are rare. Demographically, the continent is aging faster than any other developed region. Fewer workers support more retirees. Productivity growth is weak. Innovation ecosystems struggle. These are not cyclical problems, they are structural. They compound quietly, year after year. Values without power. Draghi's concluding statement directly addresses the core issue: a Europe that cannot defend its interests will not be able to uphold its values for long. Liberal democracy, human rights, and social protection are often presented as moral achievements. They are political luxuries. They survive because societies can afford them. Welfare states require productive economies. Rules require enforcement capacity. Human rights require geopolitical leverage. Values without power become aspirations. Eventually, they become memories. The sound of silence. The most revealing aspect of Draghi's speech was not its content, but its reception. It passed unnoticed. There were no sustained debates, no emergency summits, no national reckonings. Media cycles moved on. Football scores displaced strategic warnings. This is Europe's deepest weakness, not division, but complacency. Decline, when gradual, feels comfortable. The choice ahead: Europe is not doomed. It remains wealthy, educated, technologically capable, and institutionally sophisticated. It possesses the ingredients of renewal. What it lacks is political concentration. To regain agency, it would need to centralize certain powers: defense procurement, energy infrastructure, industrial policy, and strategic investment. It would need to accept that sovereignty, in the modern world, is exercised collectively or not at all. This would require sacrifices, compromises, and constitutional imagination. None of these come easily. After the order, the post-war system is not collapsing in flames. It is dissolving spreadsheets, supply chains, and standards bodies. No dramatic event will announce its end. One day, Europeans will simply notice that decisions are made elsewhere, and that their protests no longer matter. Draghi's speech was not a call to panic. It was a balance sheet review of Europe's position in a harsher world. The verdict was sobering. The global order has ended. Europe has yet to decide what comes after.